Hello there, hot listeners. Welcome to episode 6 of our podcast. If you are new, thank you for listening, and if you've been joining us since episode 0, welcome back. On today's episode, we will talk about a recap of the last few days. So we'll talk about going to a farm and some exciting activities there, a cool touristy activity we did, and also we'll talk about fear, which is one of our main topics of the podcast, and we'll talk about fear of failure, fear of change, and some ways to combat the fear. So enjoy the podcast.
Hey, Marta.
Hi, Adam.
What's cooking? Good looking?
Cookies?
Oh, what a great start to the podcast. I guess we're happy to be here, folks. We're really excited to explain what we've been up to. All the hot listeners, I'm sure, are really excited to hear what Marta and I have been doing this past week. And I think Marta's really excited to talk about this main thing that she always loves doing with her parents, her mom specifically, and me and her actually went to do it this past Saturday, which was really nice and exciting, and I'm sure she actually wants to talk since she loves to talk about it. Go for it, babe.
Sure, I'll talk about it. So one of my favorite things to do during the summer is to go blueberry picking. There's a farm in Maryland. It's kind of between Frederick and Baltimore off of one of the main highways, and it's called Larriland Farm. And they have throughout the summer, like late spring, summer, and then I guess even early fall, they have lots of fruits and vegetables that you can pick on your own, or you can go to a big barn that they have and purchase like the pre-picked vegetables. And my mom and I always go blueberry picking. It's a lot of fun, but we always pick a lot more than the average person, I would say, just based on like seeing how many bags people carry around once we're done. So.
When did you and your mom start doing this? Because I know when we started going out, you always mentioned that you've done that before. So what brought you to wanting to start picking blueberries?
I don't really know at what age we started. I know we used to also do strawberry picking, but we never picked as many strawberries as we picked blueberries, as many pounds. Mm-hmm. But I remember going strawberry picking when I was kind of young, because I remember there was like a big kind of open field and parking lot, and my parents I think I either sat on like my mom's or my dad's lap in the driver's seat, and they just like let me steer the steering wheel and go like 5 miles an hour. I wasn't 5. I just obviously wasn't old enough to drive, but that was fun. And then we would always pick strawberries there. And then I guess my mom found this farm, and we went once, probably strawberry picking, and then we realized they had blueberries, and they're so good when they're fresh and straight off of the bush. Oh, so good.
Now let's talk about the competition that you and your mom always have when you go blueberry picking. That's why you end up with a lot of blueberries that you come home with.
Yeah, so it's not really a leisurely activity. I think some people go as a family with their children or with their friends, and they just have a good time, which is not to say that I don't have a good time when I go with my mom or when Adam and I went recently. But it's more like we pick as fast as we can while also having casual conversations. So it's funny, when we get to the farm, they always give you, I don't really know how blueberry picking works on other farms because I've only done it on this one, but they give you these plastic bags that have like a cardboard at the bottom to make sure that the bag is sturdy. And usually they give you one per person.
I want to say it's like the size of like what you would see a normal plastic bucket, just in now plastic bag form.
Yeah, that's fair. And they usually give you one per person, and the signs say each bag holds 4 to 6 pounds, which through my experience, usually if it's full, it's about 4, because if you overstuff it to a certain point, then the blueberries will fall at the top, so that's obviously a problem.
That's a tip for all you hot listeners out there.
You can fill it up 80%, but then, I mean, that's kind of obvious. If you grab the handles, the bag kind of like, the top of the bag closes, and then they're just gonna, the ones that are at the very top are gonna fall out. So it's so funny because we always ask for 2 bags each because we pick a lot. And sometimes there's hesitation, like the people, because they always have at least one person that works at the farm kind of at the table where they give out the bags just to monitor how many they're giving out. And we always have to ask for 2. And sometimes they just give them out because they don't really care. And sometimes it's funny because the person hesitates, like, why do you need 2? And then we're like, trust us. We'll be back with 4 full bags. And we are, because we pick a lot.
And me and you went, I actually learned the art of blueberry picking, where before when I would go with you, I would end up like coating the bottom bag, and I would look up where you are picking blueberries and you already have half the bag basically full, and I'm really confused how you get so many blueberries. I'm not saying you're not inspecting them, but I'm like looking at them like over, turning them upside down, making sure they're all okay, and I just see you with double handing going into the bushes, taking them out, and I realize that's your strategy. You just go in and pick a bunch off a good bush. I guess we'd like you taste a little bit to make sure the bush is good.
You have to taste at least 1 off each bush, because sometimes there's some that are a little sour, so you want to make sure the blueberries are good.
Too many jokes there that we're not going to make because it's the PG podcast. So yeah, but it was a fun time. You wanted to announce how many blueberries that you were proud that we picked together, so I'm letting you do it so I don't steal your thunder, baby.
Well, actually, the story behind it is funny. Not funny. I thought it was funny. But in the morning, I couldn't go blueberry picking with my mom this weekend since she was not available to do so. But I still wanted to go because we were running low, even though Adam thought we had plenty left. But I told him we didn't, and I was going to go anyway. And he was welcome to come if he wanted to, but wasn't forced to. And then he said he wanted to come, and I was like, okay, well, if I go with my mom, there's like this expectation that we're going to pick a lot. And then with Adam, I was like, well, I know he doesn't usually come and he doesn't understand why we pick so many, so we probably wouldn't pick as many. So he only grabbed 3 bags this time instead of 4, which I was like, okay. Well, actually, he grabbed 1 and I grabbed 2, and he was like, we don't need that many. But I was like, yes, I will pick this many regardless, obviously. Mm-hmm. So then we were picking, talking, having good conversation, and we ended up picking 3 full bags, and then Adam's like, okay, well, we're done. We picked full bags, so we got to go.
I had to pull like the adult card where I'm walking away with all the bags of blueberries, saying, Marta, I'm leaving with all these blueberries, and you're sitting there, no, I need to pick more.
They were just so good and ripe and sweet, and I just did not want to leave. But anyway, so that we had 3 full bags, and I could tell that was not what Adam was expecting to pick. So then we went to check out when they have like these cash registers around the farm where you can go pay for them for the blueberries, and they weigh them and stuff. But they have a special price, not that special. You save like 25 cents per pound if you pick above 10 pounds, which might sound like a lot, which it is a lot if you're just going to use blueberries for like baking but not eat them straight, which I do, my mom does, and I guess Adam does to an extent as well. So we had the 3 full bags, and we picked, according to the cashier, 12.7 pounds. But the way he had the 3 bags arranged on the scale, the 1 bag was like leaned over or leaned kind of on the side. So I don't think he got the full weight of it. So I think we got more. So I wanted to say like we got closer to 13, but we'll
not that really matters in my opinion. It's a matter of pride in the Chirpac household. So other things we've done this past week that we want to mention here, like give a suggestion, I guess. We went to, Marta was still working in the D.C. area, so I went in since I'm off work currently. So I went in on lunchtime. Me and her went to the USDA farmers market, which was really nice. So we got to experience all the delicious foods there. I forget what exactly we ate, what it was called, but it was like these little, I don't know, like meats or pork belly and beef in like these little buns things, which were very delicious. And we just explored there. And then we ended up taking a tour of the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, so where we got to see how all the printed currency was made. So I think in that facility, it was like the $1, $5, and $20 are made in that facility, where it's like really crazy how they make it, where it's built into like these larger sheets. And then they have like serial codes, and then it's like a whole process of putting ink on top of ink on top of ink, letting it dry, and then running it through, cutting it, making sure the serial numbers are completely different from one another. So it it's an impressive process.
Yeah, the tour was very cool, and it's cool because they get to they show you like everything. I mean, obviously from the top, you don't get to go on the manufacturing floor, but we got to see from the catwalk above the manufacturing floor, like Adam said, every step of the process. So that was really cool to see and learn about. And it's funny because they sell in the gift shop just like any other gift shop of any touristy place. They sell stuff themed around that museum or tour. So everything is themed with like currency, like soccer balls, mugs, and they even sell shredded bills that I guess they just don't use anymore, which is funny because I'm like, I could just take $1 of my own and cut it up and sell that instead of buying a shredded dollar bill. But yeah, that was very cool.
The fun thing that I learned was that if for robbers out there, if you plan on robbing the BP, or ended up getting zero money because actually the money doesn't become registered until it crosses the Federal Reserve board or bureau. Was it
The Federal Reserve?
The Federal Reserve, basically, because the Federal Reserve contracts out BEP to then do the printing of the money, and then they ship it all back to the Federal Reserve. So I guess the Federal Reserve every year issues what they need currency-wise, printed currency, and then the BEP tries to go through and fill those orders, because there's one out in Washington, D.C., which is the one we visited, one in Texas, right?
Yep, outside of Fort Worth, Texas, near Dallas.
Texas, which I thought was really cool. They do the $2 notes, the 10 and 100, I think.
I think they do 50s as well.
50s as well. The fun thing with the $2 notes that you realize why they're so much more rare than other notes is that most of the times they're only put into orders every 3 or 4 years, it seems like. And also, it was really cool seeing that the Bureau of Engraving Printing had a $100,000 note, which is not really used in the marketplace now, obviously. But I think that was used as like transfer between the BEP and Federal Bureau and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think they were saying that they used to use the 100,000 between Federal Reserve banks.
Yeah, I think
because
so.
There's 12 of those Federal Reserve banks throughout the United States.
Which was cool. I guess that was just their way of keeping track of that high money back in the day, I guess. And the final thing we sort of did with a couple friend of ours, we went to a brewery, the Vanish Farmwoods Brewery, which I know Marta, when we were going to it, you were thinking completely different. You weren't thinking that this brewery was going to be what it was, because when we showed up, it actually looked a lot more like a winery, where you walk in, you have a large back area. To the left, you have what looks to be like a normal brewery, where they have a lot of people and like a lot of taps to give the beer. All these craft brews that were on the side of the wall, designed really eloquently. Those signs looked really cool. And then they had like a wine section, but it was really nice. We went with our friends, and you're able to sit in line and get like this, they call it a flight, which was like, we ended up, Marta and I getting like a flight of 12, so you could taste basically beers, and it was a really cool experience. There was a lot of kids and dogs running around. I know you enjoyed it, right, Marta?
Yeah, like you said, I guess I don't think I've ever been to a brewery. I know when I've traveled internationally, I've gone on tours, I guess, of breweries, and they were more like, hey, this is how we make the beer, and like this is every step of the process, and then they have like a small bar area with the tasting. So I kind of expected just like an enclosed area where you taste it and then you kind of just sit somewhere inside. But it literally felt just like some of the wineries we've been to, but with beer. And I was impressed because usually I don't like beer because of the heaviness and like some of the aftertaste.
Or the hoppiness, yeah.
The hop taste. But I thought it was so cool that they had like a lot of fruity flavored beers. There was
Perfect
like
for you, babe.
a shandy and one that was strawberry flavored, and beer mosa, which I guess was a light beer mixed with orange juice. So it tasted literally like a mimosa. If someone had just given that to me and not told me what it was, I would have thought it was a mimosa. It was really good.
Yeah, it was actually packed, though, when we went there. I know the couple that mentioned that they weren't expecting it to be that packed, where servers were running around trying to steal because they give you this flight, which was a pain in the butt for me to carry. It's this large brick or block of wood with like holes drilled into it where it holds like the small little beer glasses. So you have to walk with that. So they're running around trying to get more of those because they're running out.
And they fill those glasses up to the top because I remember when my friend, well, the girl of the couple, and I went to get food for the four of us, and I saw you walking back, the glasses were so full, so when you walk, like, it's so hard not to spill.
I was so worried because I was making sure I didn't tip it because I didn't want to just waste beer that way. But it was cool. It had a nice outdoor area where it was shaded. There was like a music playing. There was actually a band playing a lot of different music, which was nice. There was a actual yard area. There was a playground for kids to play. There was dogs walking around everywhere, which was very fun and adorable. And we got to see a gigantic poodle, which was an interesting experience, but it was a fun time. I really enjoyed it. It was a good brewery experience, sort of, I guess, shifted Marta's mind when it came to breweries, and mine too, because I've never seen a brewery like that.
Yeah, I was impressed. Like I mentioned before, I was excited to see my friend, or our friends, but...
Yeah, they're our friends now, baby.
But, I don't know, I wasn't excited about what I was expecting, so when we pulled up, and then when we walked in and everything, 10 out of 10 blew
10 out
my
of 10.
expectations out of the water.
That's good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
We had a fun time. I think that's really the highlights of our week, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, we could get into the day-to-day operations, but I think that would get a little monotonous and a little boring.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
No need for that.
So I figured I'd give the floor to you of why we're doing this topic that we decided to do. I know you mentioned it because I think a few of the topics I thought maybe we could do earlier on, and now you thought of this, and I wanted you to explain it. I figured maybe give some context of why we want to talk about it.
Sure. So one of the topics that came to my mind, well, a lot of the original topics are, and we'll still talk about in the future, were wedding related and all that stuff. But since we just talked about the honeymoon, I don't want to keep talking about that topic since we want to
And as we mentioned,
diversify.
We're not going to specifically just talk about our relationship or wedding stuff. I kind of want to just talk on broad ranging topics just because I like to talk with you, baby.
Yeah, it's fun. But one of the things that I was thinking about, I guess this past week and past few weeks, and just something that was on my mind that I wanted to talk about was fear. Like fear in terms of what we don't do in life because we're afraid, and also what we're afraid to do but we do anyway because we feel like if we don't face our fears, then we have the potential to always live life thinking, oh, well, what if I never did this, and having that kind of regret. And I've been thinking about this a lot because we're moving soon, and it's when you tell people you're moving, there's always two different responses. There's the excitement, like, oh, I'm so happy for you, like, congratulations, you'll do great or whatever. And then there's like the sad response, like, oh, why are you moving? Why do you have to go? Which is understandable, of course, from family. Moving far from family is never easy, but I think just reflecting, and we can, of course, dive deeper into all the notes we have written. But I think high level, something for me, especially since I grew up in the same area and went to college all within the same state, I guess, I've always had this feeling like, oh, I just kind of want to explore something else. Not leaving because I don't like it. Like, I love Maryland. It's my home state. I went to college here and all that, so I love it. But I always felt a part of me want to explore something else, and always felt this feeling like, oh, well, while I'm young and don't have a family, or not a family, I have a family, but like my husband and I, we don't have children yet, or a dog, or a house, or any of those like big things that make moving around a little bit more difficult. I mean, of course, it's always possible if you work towards it, but it's just easier when we don't have some of those responsibilities. So I've always wanted to do that, but, never really had the good time to do it until recently when we had the opportunity to move. And I don't know, it's just something I've always wanted to do, and I just feel like I'm nervous to do it, to move, but I also am at peace with moving because I know that it's something that in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, I'll look back and, even if I absolutely hate it, which I think I won't hate it because I'm the type of person that tries to see the best in new experiences, but I feel like looking back, I'll well, hopefully both of us will see it as a learning experience and
Mm.
something that was new to us and something that we tried. So I think this is a good thing that we're facing our fears and doing something that, I mean, it's not as scary. It's not life threatening, obviously, but it's still nerve wracking moving somewhere new where you don't know many people. You don't really have close friends or a lot of family, if any. So I think it's a good thing to do things that scare you. Just a little ramble of an intro to the topic.
Yeah, I think when you mentioned doing the fear topic, I think that's such an important topic to discuss because a lot of people go through these issues of fear. There's a lot of fears out there, and the main issues you always see is like fear of failure or fear of change is that one that's mentioned all the time, which is what we're going through right now. And a lot of people don't actually end up going through with a lot of things because of certain things. And me being me, I wanted to actually go through, I guess, biologically what fear or what fear is caused by, and it's just by this little almond-shaped thing in your brain called the amygdala. You have 2 total in your brain, 1 on each hemisphere. So it's basically the place for anticipation. So whenever you hear like something in the rustling in the bushes and your skin starts crawling, your pupils dilate, and you jump back real quick before you even think. That's how quick this reacts. And it goes back to when, back when we were cavemen, basically, and we had to fight off lions and saber-toothed tigers and things of that nature where you needed to react in the survival mode. Whereas now it seems more of a hindrance when it comes to fear because you have fear of, speaking in front of public places and things of that nature where it doesn't seem like it has a complete place where the only purpose of it is when you're getting into like a violent altercation or fight or flight or things of that nature. But I think it's important because through my research, I saw the National Institute of Mental Health says that 18% of the United States actually are afflicted with just fear or they have outsized fear responses when it comes to normal stimulus. So they respond more extremely to outside or to a normal stimulus than other quote unquote normal people. So this is a factor throughout the United States and people in general. And I think the main fear we wanted to touch on were just the, I guess, hypothetical fear of failure, fear of changing, because those are the main ones that you always see popping up all the time. So, yeah, I guess I'll roll right into the fears of failure, which I think there's like multiple types of it. So I guess we'll get into the main ones of fears of failure. Like starting off is the reluctance to try new things. So I know a lot of people, even me included, everybody builds up fears of the unknown and the hypothetical future. So you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. You can't plan for everything. And a lot of times people don't want to end up trying those new things because they don't know. But like what we had with Alan, he mentioned that he was afraid of doing the ballroom dancing. He didn't want to do this. He got to the place. He got a little nervous because he wasn't, quote unquote, dressed properly. And he was thinking of backing out. And then he ended up going through it. And he had a long, quote unquote, college career in ballroom dancing and did well. And that's one major fear that you always have to combat with. I mean, I feel like I personally combat with each set of these fears of failures that you can categorize them as. The next one is self-sabotage. This one I do a lot. So it's like either procrastination or just anxiety in general. So a lot of times to displace the fear of starting something, you'll go and do laundry or go clean the dishes or do something very remedial or very simple just to pass the time thinking that you're doing something, but you're not actually going to do something that you want. And I know, I mean, I don't know if you want to list all, I don't want to keep talking if you want to say something. You want me to keep going? Okay. And then you have low self-esteem, which is basically where we all get in our own heads where we say, I'll never do this or I'm not this types of statements. And I know I do that all the time where if I'm in a big funk and I am in my mind too much, I start saying, I'll never be able to complete this. I'll never live up to expectations. I'm not perfect. I'm not this smart. I'm not the best at this. And it's always an issue that I fight with all the time. And the final one is perfectionism, where a lot of people want to do and be perfect completely, where they'll only submit or do something when they know the final product will be quote-unquote perfect in their eyes and they know that it's going to be successful. And the thing with that is you're never going to be certain that a thing is successful. You have to just try. And I think the main thing that we can take out of it is failure is a possibility in all our lives, and you have to be able to deal with that and fight it and look it in its face and understand that failure sometimes can happen, and it's not a bad thing to happen. There's positives to come out of failure, which I can touch on later, but I don't want to keep rambling. I kind of want you to step in or come in and give your thoughts on all these 4 different categories of failure, fear of failure that we always fight on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think all types of these types of failure that you just talked about are all valid. Like, you can't tell someone not to be afraid of failing at something, and you can't tell yourself not to be afraid, because it really is more of a mental game and thinking about how you can approach a situation, which we'll talk about later, but how you can approach things to be less scared or kind of decrease how that feeling is affecting you. But I also feel like, just thinking about in my own life, both personally, professionally, academically, and kind of all facets of life, I feel like you learn more when you do fail. Not necessarily like colossal failures. Sometimes, yes, colossal failures, sometimes small failures, but I always feel like I remember those moments and I learn more from them, because when everything is perfect, either on a test or professionally, if you get really great feedback and you don't hear anything otherwise, it's really harder to grow because you don't have anything to work towards. So even if, you take a job that you're scared of and you do really well, that's great, but you don't really know how you're going to get better or move forward. Or same in classes. Like, if you keep just acing everything, maybe you're not scared of failing anymore, but at that point, it's more like there's a hindrance. When you don't take those risks, you're hindering your own growth and that kind of thing.
Because when you're expected to never fail, then you start to worry about failure when you get later on in life and jobs. And if you don't end up being perfect, and then when someone, inevitably in the office situation, like, belittles you or gets angry at you for not doing what you set out to do, or not you didn't completely ace it like you're used to, sometimes people can crack under that pressure because they've never faced quote unquote failure before. But I think it's important to realize that failure is a good thing, because one, it can prove how strong you are in general, how you bounce back. And most of the time, it's not how you collapse or how you fall. It's sort of what defines you, basically, is how you bounce back from that situation. I mean, it's how you learn and how you grow from failure. So I think failure is a good enlightening experience. You can learn a lot. When you mention things that you fail that stick with you, the silly one that I always think of is when I was recording an old podcast, I completely forgot to duplicate the audio to make sure that if one accidentally got deleted, but I want to lose it, but it ended up being deleted. But now I remember for the rest of my life to always duplicate the audio when you record a podcast. So,
tip for other podcasters out there.
Seriously. So I guess the ways to combat this, as I would put, for failure wise, is take things in small steps. I know small steps, small goals. A lot of times when you are thinking of creating something, I know when Martin and I were thinking of creating this podcast, your mind and just races with possibilities of being amazing, getting 1,000 listeners in one go round and it working out perfectly, but a lot of times that's not the case. So you have to set small goals to hit, and it doesn't have to be something that other people control. It can be something that you do personally. So in this podcast space, if you want to be like an interviewer, you can say, hey, I'm going to this week set the goal of reaching out to 5 people, sending 5 emails. Doesn't mean they have to reply. Doesn't mean anything like that. They're just going to you're just going to send them out. I think that's a good starting point, is setting small goals to tick off, to know that you are getting there. No matter how long it takes. You'll get there eventually if you set small goals and keep pacing yourself.
And I think something that you mentioned that is a really good point that I just wanted to reiterate because I think it makes a lot of sense is that setting goals or making like milestones or stepping stones for yourself that are based on yourself, because I think in human nature, it's part of human tendency to compare ourselves to other people and a lot of times base our own success or failure on other people's metrics, which especially this day and age in social media is so difficult because, you know, there's articles being shared and pictures shared, and a lot of times we get stuck in the numbers of this many likes or this many shares or, you know, this many downloads on a podcast, when really, I think, Adam, you said it, you couldn't have said it better, where you just need to do what you need to do as far as your goals and not be so focused on all the external factors that can bring you down or make you feel like you didn't reach your goal.
Yeah, and I think I sort of learned or thought of that, or I gained that from a book that I read recently, where it mentions where you can't compare to what other people are doing. You can look up envious at somebody, but you're never going to get there in one day or one leap. You can't make up that gap of quote unquote success, I guess you can say. The only thing you can compare to is to your prior self, and the best way to see if you're making progress, to continue to reiterate on this, is to compare yourself from the day before. If you can make a stride, doesn't have to be a large one, doesn't have to be like a completely mind-blowing stride. If it's just a tiny bit, it doesn't even have to be anything crazy. It could be, hey, my room is messy, let me clean up my room, or let me do something that I didn't do the day prior to make myself a better person, and continue growing, continue adding on until you eventually, I believe, you'll get up there if you keep trying and keep striving to become that person that you want to be. But that person can only grow based on the person the day before, not the person that you're imagining to be.
Or your friend the day before,
yes.
Or the day
Exactly. Everybody's in different places, and you can't compare. It's always apples to oranges to kiwis to dragon fruit to pineapples to blueberries to strawberries to raspberries.
Sounds like someone's been setting up on his fruits.
I was just trying to rattle off what was on my mind, but you know what
impressive.
I mean. No one is the same. Everybody is different. Everybody has different goals. Everybody has different advantages in life, different things, different people that they know that they can get ahead, but you have to just compare to where you are now and just work on yourself, because that's all you can do realistically. And I think with failure, another thing, when you have, I guess, colossal failure, or where you're trying, you sort of discover who your true friends are, where a lot of times people that aren't your true friends, I think, will pick and prod and say, like, oh, why are you doing this? This is stupid. That's dumb. I think the true friends are the ones that believe in you and sort of push you to be the better person that they know you can be. And I think that's where you can find your true friends, is in failure. When you're at a lower point, they're still there. They're always there for you, not to gain something from you. That's the difference between, I think, a true friend and somebody that is considered a quote-unquote friend. As a true friend is there not for anything, just to be supportive. And then finally, a lot of people actually can find failure as just motivation. I know you can see stories all the time where the classic one is Michael Jordan getting, he couldn't make the high school team because his coach didn't think he was good enough, didn't have enough athletic ability, didn't have the ability to play basketball, and he, knowing the competitor that he is, well, I don't really know him on a personal basis, but you can just tell the competitor that he is, he took that as a challenge. He took that as motivation. And I think a lot of people, when you're doubted, if you're that type of person and you want to prove somebody wrong, you can use it as motivation. It may be considered failure at that point in time, but you use that as a hunger or strive to go forward. Yeah, that's my... Yeah, I guess, do you want me to keep rolling on, or you got the fear of change, which actually is kind of perfect with what you were mentioning before of moving to a different state and being fearful of that?
Yeah, I can take the lead on that one. Although I do feel like change and failure can be one and the same, because a lot of times when things are changing, you're also afraid that that change will lead to failure. So it's different types of fears, but they can be intertwined as well.
And I think fear, a lot of times at the end, the fear is failure. Especially in this day and age, you're not really, especially in the U.S., you're not fearful, so to speak, of your life on a daily basis. You're more fearful of, not living up to what you want to be, your own mind, what you set in your head as a ultimate goal. You're afraid you will fall short, and you're not going to be the person that you want to be, And I feel like I feel like failure when it comes to fear is the main driver of fear nowadays, unless you have like a phobia, of course.
Yeah, true. I guess we can get into the types of fear of change.
Yeah.
Or the types within that type of fear. I guess the first one would be long-term uncertainty, and that's just thinking in the long term you're never really fully confident of this change that's happening, and as it's happening and also after, you're just still kind of uncertain and not confident in the change and also the impending result of that change and how it affects your life. Not really sure what else to add. That one's a little...
Yeah, that's sort of just the building up your own anxiety to the hypothetical, the possibilities that could happen when you're moving to a different place, doing a different thing, quitting your job to learn a new skill, going back to college, all those hypothetical things that you don't know how your long-term future is going to pan out from this move.
Yeah. The next one, immediate answers, I feel like relates a lot to humans and our nature, because when we want things, we want them like right in that moment, right now. You don't want to wait. You don't feel the need to be patient, or I guess it's just not in your natural tendency to be patient and wait things out, even though that's kind of how we're trained, and we are taught to be patient and think about the long term instead of right now. And I think that's even evident in school and also in the workplace, where you're saving for your retirement instead of spending everything right now. In school, you're investing time and effort right now to study and learn, so that in your future you'll have better opportunities for whatever job you want to do, or kind of whatever your future holds for you. But when I was thinking about this and talking just now, I thought of another interesting example of how humans want things like now. And it has nothing to do with fear, but I was just thinking about Amazon and packages in general. And I feel like just the nature of technology and today's day and age, we want everything now, and we're getting things faster and faster because of how, especially Amazon comes to mind with their 2-day shipping and 1-day shipping and sometimes same-day shipping. And it's so weird, because sometimes I'm buying something on Amazon, and if it was something that I needed right then and there, I'd probably just get up and go to the store. If I'm buying something that is that urgent, I am not buying it 2 days before I need it. But it's so funny, because when I buy something, and I'm sure people feel the same way, as soon as you buy it, you're like, oh my gosh, I got to check out the window in case the Amazon truck's coming to drop off my package. And there's just this obsession with, I want it now, when sometimes when the item gets there, you're like, oh, well, A, I don't need this, or B, it's not what I was expecting. And then you're kind of on to the next thing. So that's just, we're so obsessed with having things now and then moving on to the next thing right away.
And I think another good example of that is that you see all the time when it comes to just a simple internet connection. I remember before where dial-up used to take forever, but we were willing to sit there and wait for dial-up to work. Whereas now, I know me personally, if I'm at work or I'm on my computer, and if things aren't loading internet-wise right away, I get a little frustrated and kind of upset that I'm not getting this page that I'm trying to load, or I'm trying to look at, like, I don't know, our downloads for this podcast as a hypothetical, or trying to Google something, and I hit enter, and it's like, you see it slowly ticking up, and it just makes you more frustrated. But it goes to show that I think more and more nowadays people want things right now, and they're they're more likely, if they don't have control of a certain situation. I think when it comes to the broader term of fear in general, is if you don't have control of a situation where it's sort of it's up in the air, you're more likely to be sort of a little hopeless, a little helpless, feel helpless, and want to control something. And I think leading back, funny enough, to our honeymoon, where I sort of felt that way when we got upgraded to that room, but we had to put hope and faith into the person that we were emailing on Booking.com, and it was sort of that in between where we didn't have internet connection and things of that nature, where you couldn't control how fast that person could speed up things, and you wanted to do something, you wanted to like email them to see if they had any updates and things of that nature, but you couldn't speed up anything until finally it came through that, yeah, you have this new room.
Yeah, that's a good example. And something you mentioned earlier about not doing things or fear of change making you not want to do things and try new things kind of leads pretty well into the next type on our list, which is likely inaction. So being scared of change, and then that causing humans in general to just be more likely to just not do anything and stick with what they have because they're not certain of the outcome. And that, of course, is also very personal, because in life, if you're used to certain circumstances and a certain kind of lifestyle or having a certain community around, I mean, no one's saying no, or no one should tell you, hey, you need to, move and have this experience or do this, or really it's kind of up to you in a sense, and being the person in your own life that's guiding what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And if all your friends are moving away to different places or different states, but you want to stay where you're comfortable, then, power to you. That's awesome. But if you want to do the opposite and everyone is staying in your hometown or your community and you want to go somewhere, I think there's kind of the flexibility where we're all living our own life, just, do what you want to do. But, tying it back to the fear thing, I think that reaction is very natural, because when we're scared of something, or we just we don't know how change is going to affect us, it's just more natural to be not changing. And that's even, I don't remember the physics law, but it's like objects in motion stay in motion, and objects at rest stay at rest until affected by an outside force. I forget the exact wording. But I mean, that's the natural thing to happen in the world, to just not change unless there's an outside force that comes across.
And I think it's easy sort of for people to stay in the status quo, because a lot of times rules and regulations and things that go on your community that you grow up in, that you're inundated with when you grow up as a child, and you're listening to your parents and they're giving you the rules of how life is done, how you're supposed to do. You're supposed to work hard. You're supposed to stay in this community, work at the local business, work your way up to the, I guess, managerial role and stay there all your life, where you always have those rules, those regulations, and people have I feel like a more difficult time escaping the status quo, because a lot of times they're not told how to break free of that, and it's sort of all on them, and they feel like they're less likely to break out because they don't know the actual route. And a lot of times I feel like people just want a plan. They just want a place to go and somebody to explain to them how to do it, so to speak. And I feel like nowadays with technology and YouTube and books and the Kindle market, you can read a lot, and a lot of people actually give roadmaps now of how to change your career or try to do what you want to do, and being able to do that. So I feel like more and more people may break out of the status quo, even though it's sort of easy to stay in there. And I feel like a lot of times people want to stick with the easy way instead of, trying to make right now hard. But at the end, you're going to still be happy because you're doing something that you want to do. Even if you, quote unquote, fail at it, at least you're happy that you tried, instead of waiting at the end of your life. I don't want to get morbid, but at the end of their life where you have regrets for not trying. I mean, that's what a lot of times you hear, is people have regrets for not doing something when they're old in age.
That's a good point. And, I mean, this isn't morbid, but it's just more being grateful, I think, to your point about, like, not having regret and doing things that, might be scary, but like you don't want to regret not doing later on. I feel like just taking life and approaching it with the idea that you might make it to 90, being super optimistic, you might not. And if you don't, then just acting like you won't, and then just doing things that are make you nervous, make you a little bit uncomfortable, because that's the way that we can grow and learn and be more knowledgeable about our own community, but also other people and other cultures. And other cultures can even mean another state or like another place within a state, because I know even just driving around one state, there's so many different pockets and vibes you get within there. The first one coming to mind being New Jersey, because there's such a weird, I still do not understand this weird dichotomy between South Jersey and North Jersey, where like
even in South Jersey there's splits in how things actually are. So I remember growing up, there's a meme that goes around where it says a map of Jersey, and it gives like little slivers where I grew up when I was really young. It said like, oh, this is basically Alabama, basically, and then the towards Delaware area it was like slightly middle class, and then where we ended up moving it was like high middle class area, and it sort of showed the branching of different stereotypes in different areas just based on where you go, and how different cultures sort of placate just in one state.
I just think it's funny, and I didn't really realize this until college, where there were a good amount of students from New Jersey, but I didn't realize the difference in like where you live in the state until I met people, and they're like, or I guess not to me, but if I was with a friend or you, for example, that is from New Jersey, and someone meets you and they're like, oh, you're from New Jersey? What part? And you're like, Cherry Hill or whatever, and they're like, oh, South Jersey. I'm from North Jersey. And then it's just this weird
And I'm like, oh,
thing.
the sucky part. I got you.
And then they're like, oh, the sucky part. And I'm just over here like, in Maryland, we all just bond about loving crabs and like...
And your state flag. That's all you bond
obsessed
over.
with our state flag. Like, in Maryland, I mean, I don't want to say never, because I don't remember every conversation I've ever had, obviously. But I can't remember ever asking someone where they are from, and then being like, oh, I'm from Harford County, and me being like, the worst county. Because it's just such a weird mentality to me.
Yeah.
If someone that's listening can explain to me why that happens, if you're from Jersey or you're not and you just know more about it, tweet at us at HotPod, because
oh, look at you.
I need an explanation, because every time this happens, I'm so confused. I don't get it.
Or email us at hotpod@gmail.com.
That too. Or the whole turnpike thing. That can be a whole nother conversation. Just like how the only way you know where you are in the state is like the number on the highway. Like exit 10, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. Anyway, super long tangent about New Jersey.
I did not expect to get into that tangent when we're talking about fear. How you get to New Jersey from fear, I do not know. I guess the fear of driving through it, but...
fear of driving.
So I guess the ways to combat, we're going to go back to fear, and now we're talking about, I guess, ways to curtail it or try to combat it that we could find through our researches. One is not expect to be perfect, not expect the transition to be perfect, not expect the place you're going to be perfect, because to be frank, it's not going to be completely perfect what you completely build up to it to be.
Yeah, and along those lines, I think that something that this reminds me of is the grass is always greener on the other side thing, because you might be scared of change, but sometimes when a change happens in your life and maybe you are not enjoying whatever you were previously doing in life, whether it's your job, academics, personal, or whatever, and you think the opposite, you think, oh, I'm excited for this because it's got to be better. It's definitely going to be better, and I'll be happier when this happens. But I think don't expect things to be perfect when you're scared, but also when you're optimistic. Just kind of keep an open mind, but also try to take things for what they're worth and not play things up too much or play things down too much, because when you play things up and you're always expecting the next situation to be better, then in life you're always just not going to be happy, because you keep setting incremental goals of thinking, oh, when I do this or when I do that, I'll finally be happy. And then when you get there, you realize, oh, I want to do something else. So that a side tangent, but I just thought of that as you were talking.
It's a good point. Great point, baby. You're so smart. The next one, which I highlighted in the show notes that we're doing, which I think is really important, is getting past the fear of judgment, which I know a lot of us have that issue all the time. I know you're pointing to yourself, baby, but I'm the same way, where I'm always afraid of certain things. And like I when I was just explaining to get people understand where I'm coming from, I was afraid of explaining what our podcast was to family members or other people out there, because I'm just sort of afraid that they're going to judge me or judge us for wanting to just do something creative and doing something different. And I was a little nervous about the title of the podcast, because I know it's sort of ironic that we just became husband and wife and we're doing husband and wife talks. So I was just worried about the judgment of that. Like, oh, how are you supposed to know? And I know somebody made a comment like, oh, if you learn how to do this, tell me. Well, that's not really the point of the title or everything. And I was just nervous about, in general, the judgment of making a podcast and doing it and being fearful of what other people will think, and sort of realizing that judgment is just outside noise, and the only noise that really matters is
the haters.
The only noise that really matters is the noise between me and you, that we love to do this. I know that we've only done like 5 episodes, but we enjoy talking to one another. We've been talking for, it seems like 5 years now, it seems. So we just, that's what you have to just get past. And I know it's kind of easier said than done, is just realize that people judging you are not the people you need to worry about. I think people that give you constructive, honest criticism about things or are supportive of you, those are the people that you need to worry about, in my opinion. And I think that's what we all have to face, is just getting past that anxiety of judgment.
Yeah, you said it very well. It's just hard, I think, in human nature sometimes to totally tune out people that are judging or, providing criticism that's not really constructive. Because a lot of times, like even thinking back in school, you're technically always judged by the teacher, because whatever you do, unless it's math, which, there's either a right or wrong answer, but all of the humanities, English class, history, even to an extent some of the like more basic science classes where it's interpreting, what you learn and applying it to something else, you're at the mercy of someone else judging you. And it's even like with peer review, your peers are judging your work and kind of providing what they think, and sometimes it's not always in the nicest way. So I think that's something very important, and I'm glad it's highlighted in our show notes, because
it's important.
It's important, and I mean, we're talking about it, but obviously we're both.
Well, today's society, it's a lot of, you're afraid of being judged. That's what a lot of things come down to, and I think it has to do with social media most of the time.
Yeah. And also, I mean, social media is interesting, and that could be a whole nother topic.
I'm sure it will be, baby.
It's interesting because certain platforms, I guess Instagram comes to mind, it's usually people's kind of, they're putting their best life on Instagram. No one's taking a picture. Well, I don't want to say no one, because I haven't seen all the pictures, but mostly it's when people are dressed nicely and like look put together and not rolling out of bed, hair looking messy, eyes like half open. Like, you don't see that. You see the best version. And why is that? Because, well, I guess you don't want to put something on the internet that you're not 100% comfortable with. But also, I mean, fear of judgment. I mean, if there was no judgment, would people really care as much? Would we care so much about how many likes something got, or the filter on a certain picture, or the lighting? Or would we just, share something because we want to share it with people and not worry so much about reactions?
Oh my goodness, I feel like we need to do another social media episode, because we probably would take another hour just talking about all of that like you mentioned. But very good points. I don't know if people would care about that, but I guess continuing on the fear conversation and how to combat the fear of change. I know one thing that I thought was actually interesting and sort of made sense is to continue to do the things that you love to do in your old place, quote unquote old place. So it sort of reminds you of what you sort of left. It keeps you in the same mind space. And then also just have faith in the relationships that you're afraid of losing. Have faith if they're your true relationships. I know that's the main thing is true relationships, and realizing that they'll still be there even though you have this change. They'll still be that way. I think, and the personal example is that no matter what, when I talk to a lot of my guy friends that moved away for college and things of that nature, I grew up for high school, and I really enjoy talking with them, and whenever I actually get them on the phone or talk to them in person or text them, it just snaps right back into place, and there's no sort of awkwardness and worry. It just felt like it's always been that way, and you just have to have faith in the fact that you have a great relationship with one another.
Yeah. And I think, friendships, a lot of times it's easier when you see people every single day in school or in college, or even people you work with that you become friends with. Those friendships are easy a lot of times since you see each other, so you have more in common and you have more time to talk. But also sometimes convenience, because it is convenient and you are so close, it's kind of like just natural to develop those relationships. But I can personally vouch that, whether you're a few miles away or, like 2,244 miles away from one of your friends, you know who you are. I think you can still make it work because, like you said, the true friends, and you'll always have that like support and backing of each other. So,
and that connection that you made when you first met one another.
Wow, it sounds like a love story. The first connection on our very
now
first
technology allows you to keep interacting with friends even though they're across the country. And I think those are the main things. I think that we summed up the fear and the fear sections and fear in general. And I think the overarching theme comes from like a Stoic writer who writes about stoicism, something like that. I can't speak properly, but it's basically about enjoying your day-to-day life. And the quote was, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality," which is, I feel like, perfect for a summation of fear in general, and how a lot of times your mind sort of builds up all these concepts that could possibly happen, which you never know actually will, and you're worried about that more than what could actually happen in the present or reality of when you're doing that. And I think I got that quote from this TED Talk and this exercise, which I feel like can help bring out the fears that you have and sort of realize that maybe they're not as highly rated, quote unquote, that they could be. It was an exercise called Fear Setting by Tim Ferriss. So basically you get a sheet of paper or 3 sheets. On page 1, you have a what if I do this, or what if I, so to speak, like make a podcast, or what if I do this creative blog, or do something that you think you want to do. So you define basically the worst things that could happen. So you just list off 10 or 20, list them all off. Then you can list what can you do to prevent something like that from happening. So you can sort of have, I guess, control of the situation of how you can prevent this fear from happening, and what could you do if, in the final section is what could you do if that thing does happen, and what you did to prevent it doesn't really stave off the issue. And I think a lot of times the example he said was, what if I go away from my business and I get audited? The way to prevent that is to change the routing address for these documents from the IRS straight to his accountant. What if one document is missing? The way to repair that would be talk to a lawyer, talk to somebody in law school to figure out where to go from there if they ever had that issue before. And I think the next page would be, what benefits do you get from taking action? So what actually can happen, even if it's partial success? What can you learn from doing this creative thing? Like, for example, doing a blog. A partial success would be learning how to, work with audio, cutting, adding different sounds, making it a production value. Or a blog is learning how improve your writing. And then a large success is like, if you start gaining followers, gaining listeners, and things of that nature, and ads, and you sort of have to weigh certain things. And the final one is I feel like the main thing that drives the point home is listing the cost of inaction. So you list out the possibilities of what happens if you're not doing this 6 months down the line. What are you there? If you're 1 year down the line, what are you? If you don't do this, what happens? And 3 years down the line, where would you be? I think that point sort of sinks in, and I think that's I feel like a good exercising of facing your fears, putting them out on paper, understanding what they are. Sometimes fears are legitimate, and sometimes you just have to get them out there and see if they add up to the success or not. You may see that's a success if you rank them. The success matters a lot more than the fear that you set that's like a rank 3 or so to speak. So I think this is a good exercise for people that are interested in, they have fears of starting something or doing something or going on a vacation or something like that. So, yeah, I think that's a good exercise. Have you ever heard of fear setting?
No, I actually haven't heard of it, but sounds like a really good exercise.
Yeah, I kind of want to do that with you when it comes to the podcast and sort of write things out at least once in a quarter or something, things of that nature, just to, I don't know, get my fears out there, because you always have fears. Your mind's always racing.
It's true. I guess we can go into our final segment of the podcast. We pulled, or I guess Adam pulled that activity or exercise from a TED Talk, and Tim Ferriss, when he presented that TED Talk, he ended it with a quote by Jerzy Gregorek, who is an immigrant from Poland as a political refugee and a world champion weightlifter. And this quote I find very inspiring. It is, "Easy choices, hard life. Hard choices, easy life." I mean, the quote says it all.
Basically. I mean, do we have to explain it?
I mean, we can give our thoughts, I suppose. I mean, I don't even know what to say. It just makes me think so much and reflect, and makes me so motivated. Like, I want to go write down all the plans I have and goals and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show that sometimes you have to make the hard decisions, hard choices early on to have an easier life later on. And if you make the easy choice in your life, in the present time, in the present moment, if you make the easy choice, it could lead to a hard life, just because maybe not hard in terms of labor or hard in terms of like difficulty each and every day, more maybe hard emotionally, where you're not completely in your day-to-day work. You're not 100% invested in what you're doing. You're not doing your full potential. Whereas if you make the hard choice now, you could end up, having a better, easier life because you're enjoying what you're doing. I think like an example of that would be going to graduate school at the age 30. Instead of, you can make the hard choice of doing it now. It may be difficult for those 2 years or however long you have to do it to get your master's degree. But if you take the easy road, saying, I have too much on my plate, and you wait 10 years, now you're 40, and you probably are still doing the same job you kind of wanted to get the master's degree to get out of. So it's sort of, I think that's a pretty okay example of that beautiful quote.
Yeah, and the last thing I just thought of, I read an article recently, and it was quoting a Gallup poll. And if you're not familiar, Gallup is just an organization that does lots of polls about different things, but I know they do a lot of polls related to professional work and careers and jobs. And that poll found that 85% of people are unhappy with their jobs, which means only 15% of people feel engaged by their jobs. And I think that kind of pretty sad statistic goes all the way back to that quote. We can tie it back to, if you make the easy choice of just kind of doing what you think you should do, but not really taking those big risks, I guess, of either changing careers or going back to school, as you said, then you might be in that 85%, and that's just a really sad statistic.
That's why I'm excited to go to Colorado, do this move, do something different, be adventurous, maybe meet new people, learn new things, because you never know what's going to happen, instead of you and I staying in the same job, continuing. I don't know where I would have gone from there. So I think that I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, we're still so young, and I feel like if you're going to do something like this, now's the time. I mean, you can always do it later too, but I don't want to worry about moving kids or a dog or selling a house. It sounds like so much work. Mortgages, am I right?
I think that's a good point to wrap it up, huh, baby?
Yep, that was just a filler word.
All right, well, you can find the Husband and Wife Talks podcast on basically any podcasting app out there. We're on iTunes, obviously. We're on Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn. We're actually now on Spotify, which is really exciting. You can follow us on Twitter at HotPod. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/HotPod. You can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/HotPod. You can find us all over the place. If you want to submit questions for us to talk about on the podcast, which would be great, you can email us, hotpod@gmail.com. We'd be happy to discuss things on the podcast that you submit, maybe as a topic. It would be fun. But other than that, please continue to support us. If you're on iTunes right now, scroll down on your library feed of us and hit that 5-star and leave us a written review. It would be really nice. Baby, do you want to say anything to the hot listeners before we go?
Thank you, all you hot listeners, for listening. And don't be afraid, don't be fearful to keep listening and rate us. Share with your friends.
This is going to be a new segment where you try to
tie it back. Absolutely.
Yeah, pun everything into a rating. I like it.
I'll try.
Look forward to that, hot listeners. All right, y'all. Have a good week. Bye.